Hey everyone, this is John Houston with CIOTalks, where we bring you interviews with some of the top thought leaders in the tech world. My guest today is Greenlee. Aaron is the Director of Development for Wrecking Ball Media Group, where he's presented at numerous conferences and works to support and influence both local and larger communities. Aaron, thanks for joining me.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
So, Aaron, what I want to start with is sort of a trending topic right now, specifically big data. It's very trendy right now, and can you explain how you anticipate it will affect how development is done as it becomes more mainstream?
That's an interesting question. Well, I think there's a lot of confusion about what big data is to start off with. Some people think they have a couple million rows in the database and they're dealing with big data. But I would think of it more as the high-velocity, complex data. In a lot of applications, I think it's really an afterthought. You build your application and you set up some kind of collector, and with the tools like Hadoop and other infrastructure, you're able to analyze it after the fact. I think the real holy grail that people are chasing is to be able to incorporate and analyze it in real time. So new programming languages are coming out, like Google Go. That's one I'm really interested in. It's helping me tackle some of those challenges. But it's going to be an interesting road ahead.
Okay. And can you expand a little bit, like what exactly does Google Go do, or how does it help you tackle these challenges?
Look, Google Go is it's a new programming language that makes it easy to do parallel programming.
Okay.
Not necessarily concurrent programming, but parallel. It makes it easy to also make distributed applications. So if you have a 32-core chip in your machine, Google Go is a good choice for building an application like that. Server side only.
Okay. And so, at least when I think of big data, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm thinking of stuff like Amazon knowing what I want to buy next, or Facebook giving me recommendations of friends I like or what posts to read. Is that sort of the idea of big data, or am I missing a bigger point?
No. Again, big data I think of it as complex, fast-moving data. So, yeah, social media is a great use case for it. But you could also make it much more concrete and local. Imagine that you're a restaurant owner, and you are trying to figure out how much lobster you need to order for the weekend.
Okay.
You might need to process through previous year's sales transactions, consumer confidence data, weather data, all the more data sets that you can analyze and kind of merge into a single picture, the better your forecast will be, and the less lobster you'll waste.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. And so, moving on to another point, mobile. So mobile first is becoming a popular phrase with a lot of tech leaders. Do you agree with that statement? And if so, can you give your take on the mobile movement?
Yes, I do. I think of my wife when you ask that question, and she has a laptop available, she has an iPad available, but she's got her face in her phone all the time.
Right.
So yes, mobile first. She's purchasing on her phone. She's sharing things on her phone. The phone is her central device and has displaced every other technology in our home. So yes, mobile first, absolutely.
And from a development point of view, what does that mean to you? I mean, does that mean native? Does that mean hybrid? Does that mean web? Does it depend on the situation? Or how do you go about tackling that?
Depends on the situation. Responsive design, if you're doing a web application, there's just no excuse not to do it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Responsive design, and start with the mobile first. I mean, that's literally what's it going to look like on mobile, and then we'll take a look at desktop. Designing just on pencil and paper, oftentimes we'll have the 960 layout on one side and the iPhone layout on the other side. So we're actually just sketching both at the same time before we even head into the code. And then based on your exact need, whether you need to actually build a mobile app or if a web app is going to be enough. And if I was going to build a mobile app, it would definitely be a native app.
Okay. And can you expand on that? I mean, native's obviously been the popular choice for years now, but we like tools such as PhoneGap and other packaging tools. Do you have any interest in that, or do you think that native's still definitely the way to go?
Well, I speak from my experience, which is generally building large platforms and massive campaigns for companies like Adobe or Time Warner Cable and things like that. And my experience is our customer wants to have pixel-perfect control of the experience. And PhoneGap is a great solution. I'm not and I've seen it executed really well for things like conferences and things like that, but I find that you end up putting yourself in a box and you have to end up jumping through all these hoops to deliver the experience our customers want.
Okay, fair enough. So moving off the mobile to a larger, more traditional IT issue of security, especially now with the fast movement, it can often be an afterthought for many users, especially those not in IT who just want something done. And security can be at odds with flexibility. How do you sell the importance of security, and do you think it's given appropriate attention in the tech world?
No, I do not believe it's given appropriate attention. It's actually quite embarrassing, some of the things that I've encountered in my career. I won't go into details, but it's definitely an afterthought from the developer to the customer, project managers. It's, let's get this out in front of people, and oh my God, we got hacked.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it really needs to be evaluated at every single decision. And we're not, big 50,000-foot view all the way down to, some developer who just went in to make a patch suddenly creates a heartbleed fix.
Right.
Or a problem, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
There's no level in the organization or size of decision that security shouldn't be considered. Selling it, to follow up, has been very difficult. As soon as you throw out the word security, yes, absolutely. But then when you apply the amount of resources to it, suddenly sometimes it's not so important.
Yeah, it sort of seems like pain now versus pain in the future, and people.
Well, you always pay. There's no question about that. You will always pay somehow.
And so, even for those who are into security and are interested in that, how do you then explain? I know in my experience that the trade-off is typically flexibility. So, for example, password strength. People hate password strength, but they also hate getting hacked. So, how do you go about saying, you know what? Yeah, you're going to have some symbols or some numbers in there to make it a little less flexible, but it's going to be a big factor. You spoke about it a little bit, but when you're dealing with end users, how do you go about making it not so inflexible, but still secure?
But it depends on the context of what you're trying to secure. Sometimes just a simple plain text password might be enough. It's really all about what you're securing and how many hoops. For example, my accounts to email, banking, and web services all have multi-factor authentication. That's something that could devastate me if it was hacked. But if somebody got a hold of my account on some form,
right,
it's maybe not the end of the world.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. And so the next thing I want to talk about is cloud services, and specifically how they've taken off over really the last 4 or 5 years, and it's led some to believe that local storage and local software may soon be a thing of the past. So the Google Chromebook, for example, where it's largely dependent on online access. How do you envision the cloud movement altering business over the next several years, and do you think that this anticipation of reduced local storage is going to be a reality?
Yes, I do. People want to get their content anywhere from any device. But I'm also less certain than I was a year ago.
Okay.
The whole NSA revelations, and Russia, for example, just last week, I think, passed a new law where if you want to do business inside of Russia, you have to have your data centers inside of Russia. And it's almost kind of creating intranets, national intranets, instead of the internet. I've also seen a lot of pushback since the NSA revelations, where people are looking back at the data center instead of the cloud. So I'm less certain. The trend will definitely continue. The average consumer does not care. But big business, enterprise, anybody who has something very sensitive to protect is less pleased with the cloud.
And go ahead, I'm sorry.
But that's all.
Okay. And the data center approach is interesting to me because obviously if you're with the cloud, you're still in a data center, just somewhere else. Do you think people just want to know where their data is specifically? Do they feel like more protective over it, or what advantage are they getting for having a local data storage?
Well, there can be regulatory benefits, but if you're let's talk about source code, for example. I have some source code that I don't put up on GitHub. I'm confident that GitHub is doing an excellent job in managing security. But what if there's a rogue employee, or somebody fails to make a security conscious decision somewhere in the organization, and now my source code, which was one of my most valuable assets, has leaked online. So I just feel much better having that in a box that I control that is not even connected to the internet.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay. And the last question I want to talk about is a common theme that we've talked about in every interview in CIOTalks, and that's on innovation. And everyone I've talked to has their take on how to drive innovation. And I'm sort of curious what your secret sauce, as it were, on innovation, and what advice you could give others to encourage it.
That is a very good question. I don't know if I have any excellent advice for anybody else. What's worked for me is first getting out of the box, disconnecting, unplugging from news feeds and all the noise that's out there, and just kind of quiet my mind down and solve problems in what I hope to be an efficient way.
Okay.
Once you kind of know where you're going, it can be challenging to drag others in the organization along. And I think at the end of the day, you just have to have the right people who are willing to put in the time and trust you, even if they don't necessarily know where they're going.
Right.
And that just comes down to character and people and having the right team.
Okay. And do you have any advice or anything for you if you're not just innovating yourself, but encouraging your team or others in your company? You said that they might not know where they're going, but to encourage them to sort of push the limit a little bit and encourage on their own and then push that back to IT.
Just taking time, holding hands, making a safe, free space to think and play. And mistakes are going to happen, and it's no penalty. That's a good thing.
Right.
You have to create the right environment. You have to have the right people, and there's so many variables into that answer. And honestly, I'm still searching, I think, for the right formula. I hope I get there someday.
Okay. Well, great. Well, Aaron, I'd like to thank you for doing this interview, and thanks to all of you for watching. Be sure to sign up in the upper right corner of the site to receive an email when new interviews are posted. Also, follow us at CIOTalks on Twitter to stay on top of all things CIOTalks related. And lastly, please submit your recommendation for which tech leader you'd like to see interviewed next. Thanks again for watching. Thank you, Aaron, and I look forward to bringing you more great interviews in the future. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.